Our guest for these podcasts is Jake White. We can promise that this is one of the most interesting and useful podcasts that we have recorded. Jake White achieved a degree of fame as the coach to the Springboks Rugby Union team that won the 2007 Rugby World Cup. Since then, he has coached at the highest level around the globe, in Japan, in Australia with the Brumbies, South Africa with the Sharks, Tonga and France, and now back in South Africa with the Bulls. He has worked with and managed a multiplicity of cultures, and he has a very down-to-earth understanding of mental toughness and its importance in the success of all his teams. He has useful insights into leadership that apply to all sectors, not just sport. He also has a deep interest in and a passion for the development of young people. Jake White adopts a big-picture position on individual development and its relationship with team and culture development that is both refreshing and insightful. There is a lot of learning being shared here.
I'm fascinated to kind of hear about the different cultural things, even within South Africa, let alone everything. So I'm actually doing a study at the moment on trying to gather data on mental toughness from all over the world, because I don't really know what the cultural differences are. So it strikes me that you have a fairly unique perspective, having been in so many different cultures. So I'd love to get your opinion from a kind of mental toughness, resilience sort of perspective. How do you think it differs in those, and what do you think?
Well, again, John, it's like interesting. Mental toughness is, people look at that and they go, so you could say it's fighting spirit, for argument's sake. That would be one area, And one thing about Australians is they got fighting spirit. I mean, they are competitive to the last straw, Whatever they lack in, and I'm saying this, whatever you think they might lack in an area, they make up for it in confidence and in resilience and attitude.
Even arrogance, you might say.
Well, that's all. And you need to use that. You need to use it in your favour. I mean, the Australians will, they will fight till the death. And that's one thing that makes them so different to any other team that I've coached before. They might lack, as I said, and whatever it is, but the one thing is they will stick it for 80 minutes, Japanese now, on the other hand, the humility is obviously their strength, and the more humble you are, the more respected you are. But I don't think that, again, doesn't come with the fact that they will lie down and die. If you look at historically, Japanese have also been, as a nation, have been, they've been tough guys as well, and mentally tough too. When we talk about, I'm saying to you that there's a lot of famous Japanese people that have proven just how mentally tough the nation can be, But getting back to South Africa, as I said to you, we just live in a very different country, and I say it because we grow up differently. The kids today, especially South African kids, they grow up differently. But parents are a lot more. They mollycoddle their kids a lot more. And it's just for whatever reason. They go with them, as I said, to the shopping centres. They will never leave them alone. Whatever the reason is, whether we're scared about the fact that it's unsafe or whatever the story is, our kids they won't, and therefore they grow up. I think they grow up differently when it comes to understanding toughness. And the ironic thing is we double World Cup winners, and so rugby-wise people would say, but how can that be, Jake? We still win World Cups, and that's true. But I would think that if I compare, not just about that element, if I compared our kids grow up, the measurement, I suppose that's my question to you, what is the measurement of success in mental toughness? Is it just winning, sporting events, or is it being able to be a proper father and dad and person in life? Is that also a measurement of whether you're mentally tough? Because let's be fair, life is different today than it was 50 years ago. There are a lot of more other things, that challenges that people have to deal with today than they never had to deal with 50 years ago. So, is the world mentally tougher now than it was those years, or were we tougher in the olden days?
Yeah, and there's the one that's impossible to answer, but it's certainly interesting to sort of hypothesize around it. And so we measure mental toughness all the time, but I think part of we try and measure that through trying to understand how people think and how people perceive situations and their general feelings in situations. But I think you're dead right to then say it's hard to pin that on an outcome.
Correct.
Because that outcome has a million and one different variables that cause it, and mental toughness is one factor. And in sport, the technical ability, how well organised they are, a bit of luck, all those kind of things. Sometimes there's a bit of energy that you get, like from a home crowd or something.
Correct.
So many things that I was thinking you could say, yeah, South African rugby's won 2 World Cups, they must be tough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big cricket fan. You could look at the big 100%. Cricket tournaments that South 100%. Africa should have won.
Sure.
But they've kind of thrown it.
But that's sport, and I was thinking now about what you said. I mean, imagine climbing on a boat in the 50s, moving your whole family to another country.
Yeah.
How mentally tough do you need to be to withstand that,
Yeah.
How mentally tough do you have to be when the foot trackers were taking ox wagons over mountains in South Africa, So, that's mental toughness too, we measure it, as I said, lucky enough in sport, you talk about athletes that are...
It's interesting that, because my parents were refugees from Poland,
yes.
So they ended up in the UK, and they were definitely mentally tough.
Auschwitz, wasn't it?
Exactly, Doug. That's why I said, I think that it's interesting because you guys talk about mental toughness. Is the generations of today as mentally tough as the generations of those times?
But John says it's actually a complicated question, and it's got lots of nuances to the answer. But we did a piece of work with Edinburgh College, and they had taken about 500 Polish students, and they noticed that the exam performance of the Polish students was better than the exam performance of the Scottish students. So they concluded that the Polish students were better than the Scottish students. And I said, well, just a minute, if it was the other way around, and you put Scottish students into Polish colleges,
the people who have up sticks and moved to a different country.
So somebody who's got enough nous to up sticks and go to another country is going to be more mentally tough than most of the people in that country. So it's there's a lot of complexity in this.
And I think as well there's different components of mental toughness. So dragging a wagon over a plane or something is this, I suppose we refer to as commitment, but it's kind of just bloody mindedness, sticking at something, not quitting, never giving up. Whereas today, where there's so much information, there's so many different things, it's not necessarily I've got to zone in and just knuckle down and keep doing this one thing, bang, 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 and never giving in. But I suppose it's more that feeling that you're in control and emotionally, when there's just so much stuff around you to deal with. Every day there's just loads of stuff, and it kind of just... So it's still mental toughness, but it's a different kind of type of it, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I'm going to give my age away a little bit here, but when I went to school, I used a slide rule before calculators, even before computers, before iPhones.
Just carve into a stone, didn't you? Hieroglyphics.
I wouldn't say that old, but don't worry.
And if I had to write an essay, I had to go to the library and get a book and then read the book. Now you can Google everything you want. So would today's person find that generation or that way of living and way of working very stressful? I'm sure they would. As does people from that generation living now. There are people of my age who struggle with the internet. They just can't get their heads around it. Where does all this information come from? That sort of thing. But we adjust. Most of us do adjust. So, I don't know, there's a very complicated answer to you're asking some great questions, we haven't got the answer to them.
No, but I've been debating this with my players, as in my squad, for the last sort of 6 months, because we've come so close. We lost a final. and we lost another final.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, what is the nugget that we're missing? Because are we talented? Yes. Is this group of players getting better? Yes. But what is the nugget? And sometimes I think the nugget for me is that we're not where we need to be mentally. And let me explain to you what I mean. Because the world is so big now, is you can go to any club. You can make money or you can move to any club. So the actual jersey and the club, it doesn't drive you anymore. You have to drive yourself. In the old days, think about it, any sporting team, if you said to someone you're playing for Munster, that in itself would have made him go up another level. But now there's guys playing for Munster that are Kiwis and there are guys playing for Saracens that are South African, and there are guys playing for. So the drive, like you say, I think that is I'm also challenging myself on that. Is what is it what is going to motivate him to become mentally, whether he's tougher or mentally prepared to put himself in a situation that will make him win.
I think you've already given the answer earlier. That's about creating that culture.
Yeah.
So when somebody steps into that culture, they absorb that culture and they feel like they belong to Munster even if they don't come from Munster.
Correct.
When I was born in Scotland, a third of the Scottish team aren't Scottish.
No, sure.
But they play like Scots. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the in itself, this is probably and it sounds interesting because we played in Edinburgh last week, and one of the photos on the wall is a South African guy.
Yeah.
And he's, obviously his brother plays for us.
Yeah.
And that made me trigger about, here's a South African kid, couldn't speak a word of English when he grew up, playing for Scotland.
Yeah.
So what is the nugget that makes you play like that for Scotland? And it can't just be money, can't just be that, because that's why, I just don't think it can be. That's why you never become the best in the world if that's only about earning a salary.
I'm just guessing here, but we wrote a book which we called Who Cares Wins. And sometimes, if you care enough about an individual, they'll do anything for you. So maybe somebody in Scotland cared a little bit more than somebody in South Africa, and that made a difference. Yeah.
It's true. I mean, I'll tell you, funny because I know the kid well, and it happened when I was coaching him at Montpellier, and he had a certain time to get into Scotland, and they told him, you have to come, because if you come now, you will be eligible in X amount of time, and they did everything they could to make him feel like he had to get there.
Yeah.
So maybe that was the catalyst he needed in order to,
I'm glad you let us have him, because he scored that brilliant try against England.
Correct. Correct.
And I it's interesting as well, the kind of the piece on the finals bit. I was being asked a lot, because we're filming this is just after Rory McIlroy's won the Masters, right? So I've been asked a lot about kind of mental toughness and resilience and stuff there. And I kind of make this distinction between where he demonstrated a lot of resilience in the screwed up, didn't give up, came back, screwed up, didn't. It's that kind of reactive coming back from a problem piece. But something that would be truly mentally tough would be Tiger Woods, where you'd think he wouldn't miss those small putts in the first place, because that kind of toughness is that barrier between the external environment, the pressure, the meaning, the legacy, the narrative, the story we build around what this means, kind of starts to affect your internal state. Someone like a Tiger Woods would have been phenomenal at just sort of compartmentalising that. And I think that's to your earlier point, Jake, when you say about like the young lads who, they don't have that appreciation of what it means to have that, which means it doesn't, when you're in those situations, that narrative, that story doesn't start to affect how you feel inside. And to me, that's kind of what being tough, it kind of is. It's that sort of barrier, whereas someone who's more sensitive, you're sensitive to that context, to that pressure, to that surrounding, and your internal state is then influenced by the stuff going on around it. And I once spoke to, I don't think snooker is a big thing in South Africa, right? But I spoke to Steve Davis once, years ago. I was training to be a sports psychologist. And Steve Davis was a 6-time world champion in snooker. And I happened to be in a restaurant and he was nearby. He just lost in the first round of the World Championship. He was about 50. He was still playing it. And I tried to ask him in a way of, it's snooker, right? How do you get bad at snooker? You were phenomenal. How do you then go to losing in the first round every year? And he said, I know too much about what it means now. I have too much context to it. When I was winning, I just played.
That's true. I mean, I think about Rory. Why did he fall on his knees and sob like he did? Because he must have understood it. He just didn't want to show it. You know?
Yeah.
So that's also true.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always said, if you told someone make that putt and your life will change forever, and your name will go down in the history books of golf forever, the chances are you'll miss it.
You've just made it 50 times.
Exactly, exactly. So that's why I said to you about the player who doesn't care, and I mean it like that.
Yeah.
That's the part. He doesn't care because he'll knock it in. You know what I mean?
Just execute the skill and get on with it.
Correct. And those are also the mentally tough kids that understand. You know, that part it's about him being good enough to knock it in. You know.
Mm.
And again, I'm not saying for anything about Rory, but I mean because it's fantastic, and there's lots of things. Had he not won that playoff, can you imagine then what people would have said about mental toughness?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, now, as you said just now, they'll write books about him, resilience, and coming back, and years after messing up, you know, whatever. Had he lost that, you know, and I bet you, I bet you he must have thought about that. There's no ways that he went through all that, making 7 on one hole and then 4 on the next hole, whatever. Didn't think, here we go again.
One of the hardest things about golf is you've just so much time to think.
Yeah.
You know, you just.
But I go back to, that's why I said to you, in my sport, it's I'm looking for that nugget too. That's why I'm quite enjoying chatting to you about that, because why do you lose 2 finals, and why when you get another crack at it, you'd make the same mistakes you made before. And I'm not talking about game mistakes, the same prep mistakes, the same, you know, and you know, I think that's the environment is the thing that you've got to change all the time. You know, I genuinely do believe that the environment it's got to be evolving all the time. What worked last season not going to work this season, and because the group changes, you know, they're all 1 year older, you know.
Yeah.
And I look at our group now, and when I started 5 years ago, maybe 1/3 were married or had girlfriends. You know, now it's probably 2/3 of them have children.
Right.
You know, that's how it's evolved in 5 years. You know, so now all of a sudden, talking to them, I'm not talking to single boys that have got a girlfriend. I'm talking to fathers. You know. Therefore, the environment. And that's also true, the mental toughness. Think about it. How do you motivate mental toughness, or how do you bring it out? And sometimes you need to relate to their emotions as well, you know, because that also helps with mental toughness, you know, or the ability to handle emotion.
And on the emotion, I'm interested to know how you manage that yourself. So I've done a little bit of just soccer coaching and stuff like that. And if I'm playing a sport, I'm pretty chilled out. Like, you know, not really stressed. I'm not kind of giving out to the ref or anything like that. But even at the lowest amateur level you can imagine, I'm pulling my hair out if I'm managing a team.
Mm.
How do you do that at a World Cup?
Well, look, one thing you do, and I did do this, is you also visualize the highs and the lows of what could happen and what can't happen in the games, and you got to talk yourself into those situations as well. But like belief, you know, if you believe you're going to win as a coach, it's easier to sell that to the players. If you believe you're not going to win, I mean, it's very difficult for you to stand up in front of them and get them to run through a brick wall if you're not convinced you can do it. So you have to work out scenarios on how, you know, I mean, Tom Brady, for argument's sake, I know him and I've chatted to him, and I remember one word piece of advice he gave me is, sometimes you need to fake it until you make it.
Right. Yeah.
And that stuck really clear in my head, is that players want to see whether or not you believe. And if you like he said, if you can show them, even if you're faking it, that eventually you'll make it. So that was one thing. And the other thing, which sounds absolutely crazy, but I have lots of friends, and my best friends aren't in rugby.
Right.
So it helps me a lot with not feeling like the world's on my shoulders, because I have other things that I do with my friend or my friends that give me balance, and they also give me perspective of So I'll give you an example. My best friend, for argument's sake, probably wouldn't know we played last weekend, because it's not life and death for him.
Right.
What I meant by that is, if he was having a braai or if he was fishing or whatever the story was, I mean, he would want us to win, but the fact that we lost to Edinburgh in the quarterfinals, he would, that would give me perspective. I phoned him and he said, "Oh, did you guys play last weekend?" You then probably get a little bit more, I suppose, perspective of what your job is, But because it's life and death for me, but when in his world, he's not going to sit in front of his TV in the afternoon, and he's my best mate.
I really liked your description of your preparation for a game and the way it influences the team.
Yes.
You don't believe that you're
Yes.
going to win, it'll impact on the team.
Correct.
What really impresses me is when somebody's lost the coach.
Yes.
How does a coach manage themselves? Because I watched Franco Smith
Yes.
last week on television,
Yes.
and I thought, did he really lose that game?
Yes.
He just was. They got hammered by Leinster.
Leinster, yeah.
And he came on, and as if it was just a narrow defeat. I mean, he recognised the size of the defeat, he recognised everything, and yet he remained calm. And I can only imagine he'd be an inspiration to his players.
Well, look, I think it also helps you got runs on the board.
Yeah.
I think if you're a young, aspiring coach and you did that, it could come across differently to players.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
If you've won the URC last year, and I'm talking now for myself as well, if you've won tournaments and they have faith in you, you probably find it easier to go, look, there's life now, we're still alive in other things, and this is a blimp on the radar. So I didn't see that interview, Doug, but what I'm saying is I can imagine that, and don't underestimate, I'm talking now for myself, as much as I pre-plan what I think I need to say before, I also pre-plan on what I need to say if we don't get that result.
Right,
And it can't, it sometimes is a gut feeling at the moment, but it also got to be controlled in that you get out of it long term what you need to get out of it.
And you're obviously recognising that you can control your team. You can't control the other team, and they might just rise to the occasion on that day.
Did you ever read have you ever heard about that when Jurgen Klopp coached and lost the Champions Cup final, and then they all thought that they were going to go to bed, and they were all, and he would be upset, and he made all the team come down and have a beer. They almost partied as much as they would have had they won. And he said, because he needed them to understand, which I agree with, is that they will only get better, and their time will come again.
And they've still got to a pretty high level.
Correct. So I think sometimes, and that's
perspective
part of as a coach, that you need to learn from other coaches as well. Who is the coach that got players to be mentally tough or win when they shouldn't have won?